Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Daily on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Daily is brought to you, of course, as always, by mybookie.ag. And now you get a special promo code with the Grueling Truth of TGT100, which, by putting that in at mybookie.ag website or going to gruelingtruth.com, clicking on the banner top of the page, will give you a 100% bonus now up to your first $300. So if you put $300 in, you'll have $600 to play with. I am your co-host, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser. And Jeremiah, every time I say they'll give you $600 to play with, it makes me laugh like a 12-year-old.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. Why does that give you something to laugh at?
I don't know, because it says play with.
Play with? Yeah. I like that term too, because I'm familiar with it. I'm familiar with the term.
You're married, so you get turned down and you say, well, will you just play with it?
Exactly. I'm like, well, you don't want a handy because they can't do it as well as you can. But,
Yeah, but you know what? I mean, if you're not doing it yourself, sometimes it's better to have somebody else do it. So.
Well, I mean, maybe if both your wrists are broken, I mean, but for me, it's just, I've been doing it so long. I mean, come on, we're talking about 20 years of experience here. I don't know, man. You just can't.
How old are you?
32. Hell, I don't even remember.
20 years of experience. All right. We're going to go ahead and get out of the gutter now for a little bit at least. And we're going to start off with the top boxing news of the day, which is that Luis Ortiz claims that he is being lowballed by Eddie Hearn. I don't know what lowballed by Eddie Hearn means. I think Jarrell Miller was supposed to make $6 million. So I don't know if lowball means they're offering him $500,000, $5 million, or what it is, Jeremiah. But no matter what it is, you would think it's got to be at least a couple $1 million. And for a shot to fight Joshua at Madison Square Garden, why wouldn't you take that?
Yeah, no shit, right? I mean, I don't know, man. I'm just not quite sure that makes a lot of sense to me. The reason being is because Eddie Hearn knows he's probably got a pretty good idea of what Luis Ortiz's market value is like. I mean, come on, this guy's been in big fights
better than Jarrell Miller's probably.
Exactly. Well, even if it's Jarrell Miller's, I mean, come on, 6 months, or $6 million on 7 weeks' notice, whatever it is. I don't know, man. Like I was telling you off air, I think this is probably the product of him assuming that he might get another shot at Deontay Wilder. And I don't think that's far-fetched. I mean, I do think it's possible that he'll get another shot at Deontay Wilder. I mean, the first fight sold well. It's playing on the PBC side. We're not sure what we can expect with the heavyweights anyway. So I think he believes that he's pretty safe in his assumption. But I honestly don't know. I mean, if Tyson Fury, if we get a, Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury rematch and Tyson Fury wins, even clearer than I thought he did the first time, I mean, where does that leave Luis Ortiz? What's he think that, the WBC is going to sanction him as the mandatory guy? I mean, what is Ortiz? Is he ranked like number 2? I mean, according to the WBC, that means he's like 4th in line.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be the 4th ranked contender to be the mandatory there. But the point is,
exactly.
If you want a Wilder fight, if you beat Joshua, you go get the Wilder fight. It is going to be worth a lot more money. But that's neither here nor there, because we never know what Hearn's offered him. And Ortiz could be full of crap. Hearn could be lowballing just because he doesn't want to deal with that fight. But when I look at this leads me to my favorite part of our show, and we've actually got a couple of these tonight. If you've listened to us in the past, you know about Boxing News 24. And Boxing News 24 employs some writers that are, let's say,
top
maybe
notch.
not
Top
on the
notch.
up and up. And the leader of this pack is Aragon Garcia. And if anybody out there knows Aragon Garcia, please give him my phone number, hook him up with us so we can have him on the show to explain the asinine, stupid articles that he writes. Now, this is what he writes, all right? Negotiations are said to be underway between heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz Jr. Ruiz, ranked number 15, would be the replacement for Jarrell Big Baby Miller. Okay, now, he said that Hearn wanted to find an American to replace Miller, and Ruiz fits the bill. He's perfect. Ruiz is a big upgrade from Miller. Does anybody think that? Anybody? Jeremiah?
Go ahead and play the Jeopardy song now.
He says that Andy Ruiz is a big upgrade. Now, what the immortal Aragon Garcia goes after say after that, it gets, what was that movie where it gets stupider? I think it was North Dallas 40. No, it gets stupider. And he said, let's see, I got to get to this because this is really good. But they said it looks like Michael Hunter's out now, and the Ruiz fight would be huge because Ruiz has fought Joseph Parker in a fight for the vacant WBO heavyweight title in December 2016 in New Zealand. This writer saw the fight and had Ruiz winning comfortably by an 8-4 score. It was an easy win for Ruiz, or it should have been. The controversial loss cost Ruiz a world title. Number one, you have no credibility if you think beating Joseph Parker for the WBO title is for a world title. And it says, as close and questionable as the decision was, the WBO should have ordered a rematch because there were too many boxing fans that saw Ruiz as the winner of that fight. Now, number one, Jeremiah, do you know anybody that thought Ruiz won that fight? And on top of that, do you know anybody that won it 8-4?
Yeah, can we, if there's anybody listening to us, when you're on Twitter or something, can you go ahead and chime in and see, just tell us if you actually scored the fight for Andy Ruiz? Because I got to be honest, I don't recall seeing anybody scored for Ruiz. And it's not that it wasn't a close fight, but 8-4?
All right, Raymond
8-4?
has already, Raymond, I don't know where he's from, but his name is Raymond. I think his last name is Ramirez, but I'm not sure. It says, Ruiz is a big upgrade from Miller, ? LOL. Man, these writers need to get into comedy. So there you go. You already got one.
Yeah. Somebody needs to tell Aragon Garcia that, go down to amateur hour at the local comedy club. Because, I mean, the shit is comedy. I mean, I don't know what he was watching, but listen, if you listen to the show regularly, you know what this guy's about. I mean, he's just all over the WBC's nuts and all over a lot of people, guys like him. He's just on the nuts of a lot of people like him. I mean, and it's just, frankly, it's silly. I mean, I didn't see anybody who scored it for Andy Ruiz when they fought. And I don't remember near as much controversy with that decision as say, Jaime Munguia and Dennis Hogan. I mean, I don't remember nearly the outcry for that. So, I don't even see what the hell he's talking about, honestly. And for Andy Ruiz, like this guy, and thanks for chiming in, by the way, we really appreciate it. But like you said, I mean, LOL, man. I mean, this is a big upgrade from Miller, who was ranked higher than Andy Ruiz by every single reputable rankings organization, transnational in the ring. I mean, come on, Miller was bigger, he was stronger, and I think most of us would pick Jarrell Miller to beat Andy Ruiz Jr. I mean, of course, now there's some question marks surrounding that because of Jarrell Miller's stamina, but I mean, he's a bigger guy, even without all the stamina, I still think he beats Andy Ruiz. He's just too big for me. He's just got too much length, but I don't know what the hell this guy's talking about.
Answer me this question. Why was Andy Ruiz suspended until April 26th of this year by the California State Athletic Commission?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, did you see that on BoxRec? Because you'll see that a lot of times.
Yeah, because I pulled it up just to look at what he's done, and it said that. Now, I mean, breast enhancement maybe? I don't know. But he beat Alex Dimitrienko, who is a journeyman at best. He beat Kevin Johnson, which that would have been a great win in 2009, and it took him the distance. He knocks out Devin Vargas. This is after his fight, which was a majority decision loss to Joseph Parker. When you look at this, there's nothing on his record. There's not one win that I think is a quality win. I mean, there's nothing here. There's nothing that says he deserves this shot. Joseph Parker beat him. That's probably his best. I don't know what his best win is here. He beat an old Ray Austin, an old Sergey Lyakovich in 2014. So there's nothing that would put him there except for the fact that he's Mexican. And if you're going to fight or have Anthony Joshua fight in the States and it's Andy Ruiz, why wouldn't you put it at the Staples Center?
Yeah, exactly. That would make a lot more sense. But I mean, at this point, they're just they're trying to figure out who would sell and who wouldn't sell. And at this point, my guess is that Andy Ruiz, even on the East Coast, is probably a bigger sell than Michael Hunter. Hunter had a good amateur career, and a lot of the hardcore fans recognize him for that. But if you're talking about who's got more casual appeal, I think Andy Ruiz is that guy. But I'm with you, man. He's really done nothing to deserve this shot. I'm sure Aragon Garcia disagrees with us, but it doesn't really matter at this point. I mean, I'm not hanging my hat too much on whoever the opponent is anyways, because we know on short notice it's not going to be that great. I mean, Andy Ruiz, I'd have to look at the rankings, but he might be, near the bottom of the top 10 still. So it's not like he's a terrible operator.
He's ranked 15th again, by the one organization that ranks him, I think.
Well, yeah, that doesn't mean shit to me, though. Again, in terms of independent rankings or organizations, I know he's broken the top 10. So, again, he's not a bad fighter. He's good for what we've got today, and it's probably the best replacement that we can get. I actually think Hunter might be a better styles matchup. I think that might be more competitive. But, again, if you want to sell tickets and this is Anthony Joshua's American debut, it makes sense.
And I think we can agree Andrew Ruiz has no chance. But that gives him more of a chance than Manuel Char would have. Yep, exactly.
I mean, I think Andy Ruiz would light Manuel Char up at this point. I don't even know why this guy's being considered. He got popped for PEDs too. I mean, it's like nobody talks about that shit. I mean, yeah, Jarrell Miller, he's almost a one-off case with all of the PEDs that he got popped for. And he's probably doing more, to be honest with you. I mean, we're talking about a guy who, got popped. I mean, what did they do testing for? 8 weeks or something? I mean, imagine what this guy was on beforehand. What he had already cycled off of. But Manuel Char, I think he got stripped of his stupid secondary WBA regular title because he had PEDs in his system.
All right, so let's move along to the lightweight division where Mikey Garcia vacates his WBC lightweight title to become emeritus champion. The emeritus champion, I believe, means he can move up in weight, and if somebody else, whoever wins his belt, he can then immediately drop down and challenge them, correct?
Yeah, something like that.
All right. So that looks like it frees it up for his mandatory Luke Campbell to fight for the belt, possibly against Vasyl Lomachenko. My question is this, and this will lead, of course, to another Aragon Garcia article. But why, if you're Mikey Garcia, do you not take the fight against Lomachenko? Because I think after what we saw with him against Errol Spence, where he got dominated for 12 rounds, it's obvious that he cannot hang with a Keith Thurman or a Terrence Crawford or a Sean Porter, Danny Garcia, maybe even Manny Pacquiao at that weight now. So why would you not go for the big fight with Lomachenko?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, you hear some chitter-chatter around Mikey Garcia, and some of them have the impression that Mikey Garcia couldn't handle it. Like, it wouldn't be good for his body to drop down a full traditional weight class because it might harm him in some way. And honestly, I personally don't buy that line. I mean, that's his natural weight. I mean, that's where he should be. And I think what he's indicating.
Do you think that maybe since the Roy Jones thing with John Ruiz, that people just kind of automatically assume that now without realizing that Roy Jones was going well above his original weight? and then
Yeah.
coming back down.
Well, yeah, and what a lot of people aren't realizing either is that plenty of people have been able to go up and move back down. I mean, shit, Bob Foster moved up to heavyweight, and then he would go back down to 175 and beat the shit out of somebody there. I mean,
Yeah, then go back to heavyweight, get knocked out, and then come back.
Yeah, he'd go get, smacked around by Muhammad Ali, go knock somebody out at 175, go get beat up by Joe Frazier. I mean, at least he was willing to take on the challenges. You got to give him that. But this is the thing is, there's historical precedent for both, so for people to say, hey, well, look what happened to Jones Jr. He hit a wall. I mean, Jones Jr. had already been fighting for many years by that point. I mean, his run as a trinket holder, was what, like a decade, 15 years or something at that point. So his case is a little bit different. Mikey Garcia is not, he doesn't have that much tread on his tire. So I'm not as fearful of that. And again, there's historical precedent for both. And I think he would be just fine at 135. He's been there, before. And, some people say, oh, well, he fought, Sergey Lipinets at 140 pounds not long before that. Again, he's fighting above his natural weight. He can look at his body type.
He didn't look that good against Lipinets even.
Well, look at his body type, too. he doesn't look ripped at 140, 147 pounds. So you can tell just by, it just reminds me of what, Nonito Donaire has gone through. He started his career. He was fighting as low as a flyweight. He kept moving up and up. And, at 126, he looked chubby. He had a bit of a pudge. Again, it didn't look like he was, boozing or anything before he entered the ring, but you could see that it wasn't tight there. And Mikey Garcia is the same way at 140, 147. And I honestly don't see any reason personally why he just can't go back down there and try to establish himself. What we talked about this on a previous episode, I believe, and you look at the landscape at 140 pounds and what exactly is he going to do there? The World Boxing Super Series is currently underway. You have Prograis versus Relic, and
I would favor Prograis over him right now.
I think Taylor and Prograis. I want to see how the finals plays out, but my point is that both of those guys are going to be taken up for a little while now. At the very earliest, he's not going to get the winner of that tournament, and who's going to hold what is it, 3 of the 4 or 2 of the 4 major alphabet soup titles? Because I think Maurice Hooker holds 1, and then Ramirez holds another. And so the winner of that tournament is going to hold 2 of them. And so I'm trying to think, what exactly his path would be. And he could target Maurice Hooker. That would make some sense because Hooker, to me, is low-hanging fruit. He's the easiest guy to beat there. It would also make a lot of sense to fight Ramirez, who that would be WBC. They would sanction that in a minute. But the problem is that Ramirez is a top-ranked fighter. So if you think Bob Arum is going to say, hey, yeah, you can win a title off one of my guys, but, not another and potentially Lomachenko, I just don't think that follows. So when you're looking at it, to me, it seems like Maurice Hooker is the only way he can go. And I just don't like that fight at all. Mikey Garcia could win another alphabet trinket, but what does that really do for his legacy? Again, to me, Hooker's the weakest guy in the division.
Yeah, his legacy fight is Lomachenko at 135.
Exactly. That's all there is to it. The belts be damned. The Lomachenko fight, even if it was for no titles at all, that's the best fight to be made. So I don't know exactly what's going to go on, but we know of their history, of course. Mikey Garcia sat out his contract with Top Rank. So him and Bob Arum are on good, speaking terms. So, I don't know if we're ever going to get that fight, but that's a fight that should be made.
All right. Aragon Garcia, do you want his take on this?
Dude, it's insightful. I feel more enlightened every time I listen to him.
Here we go. He says, Mikey met defeat at welterweight against Errol Spence, but that was a good effort from Mikey, considering that he moved up 2 weight classes, take on arguably the best fighter in the welterweight division and a 29-year-old Spence. Mikey went the full 12 rounds in losing a unanimous decision, but he was never hurt, never knocked down, and he gave a good account of himself. Now, later on, he says, some boxing fans think Mikey will never be the same fighter ever again after the punishment that he absorbed in the Spence fight. but he really didn't take much punishment in that fight. Mikey had a rough 9th and 10th rounds, but other than that, it wasn't a punishing fight for him. Mikey had a much harder time against Sergey Lipinets than he did against Errol Spence.
Yeah, no, he's absolutely wrong, and this is why I like reading his shit, or you reading his shit, because it's just it's so off the mark. I mean, harder fight with Sergey Lipinets than Errol Spence. I mean, if he had a harder fight with Lipinets, why would he knock Lipinets down and win by a pretty clear decision? I mean, that doesn't make – dude, I'm over here scratching my head like, what is this guy watching, you know? But no, clearly he did take some punishment in the Spence fight, and I do agree – I can agree a little bit that, you know, he didn't take a big ass whooping. I mean, it's not like he was, you know, flopping around the ring and trying to stay afloat and, you know, hanging on for dear life. I mean, he did gut it out well. You know, he wasn't hurt clearly, but you could see that he was taking a decent amount of punishment there. You know, he was blocking quite a bit. He couldn't get off much. You know, he ate a number of punches. I mean, that was his physically. Yeah. That was
Mikey got his ass handed to him by a superior physical and just a superior boxer in Errol Spence. Yeah, and I mean, I don't like to say that, but we knew going in pretty much what was probably going to happen because of the size difference. But the chances he took by moving up were great. But the thing that never made sense to me, and we've talked about this before, but why didn't, if he's worried about the move down in weight, why didn't he just fight Lomachenko first? There's a reason he's not fighting Lomachenko, and I think that reason is, from what we've seen of Garcia, it doesn't matter which one's better. In a styles matchup, Lomachenko beats him every time.
Yeah, I think so too, and I've been saying that for ever. I mean, you know, I do think Mikey Garcia is a very, very good fighter. I mean, as I've said on the show before, I mean, technically he's superb. He does basically everything you teach a guy in a gym. I mean, he throws the jab wonderfully. I mean, you know, his footwork is good. You know, his punches are crisp. He brings his hands back. I mean, you know, he counterpunches well. I mean, he's a very, very good fighter. But I think there's a little hesitancy in fighting Lomachenko. I mean, I get it. You know, maybe he doesn't want Bob Arum to get a cut of that. But I also think that he's just a little worried about what might happen against Vasyl Lomachenko. I mean, because if he wasn't that worried, it's the same thing with Javante Davis, right? It's like, if you're not worried about it, then why don't you just fight the guy? I mean, I'm sure Javante Davis had no problems at all fighting any of his other opponents when they were like, hey man, what do you think about fighting Jose Pedrosa? He was like, well, you know, just give me the contract, right? But when you see a guy like Vasyl Lomachenko, I mean, the guy's intimidating. Yeah, he's not necessarily intimidating in the sense that, you know, like a guy like Bob Foster was, where he could, you know, knock your block off. Of course, he's got some power, but you just see the style there, and you know it's going to be a hard night. I mean, you know you're going to have to prepare your ass off to get it done. And I don't know, man. It just seems like a big, stupid, long, roundabout way of getting to the Lomachenko fight, if that ever happens. Because, again, we all recognize that that's the fight to be made. You know, beating Maurice Hooker. I don't
think it's ever going to happen, Jeremiah.
And he might be right. And I really think that's unfortunate for, you know, Vasyl Lomachenko, because I think he's one of the few guys in boxing who genuinely wants the best. Him and Alexander Usyk, I think, though, you know, those are two guys who clearly want it. I think Crawford's another one of those guys. I think Spence clearly wants it too. You know, I don't think there's any hesitancy on any of their parts, you know, but this is what we got to deal with. And so we're just going to have to wait it out. And, you know, as the longer it goes on, the more question marks we have, right? It's like, oh, well, you know, he's gotten older and he's, you know, maybe he was right. If Lomachenko clowns him, you know, then what are people going to say? Oh, well, maybe he was ruined by the Errol Spence fight. I mean, see,
this is what they're going to say, because
this
may be true, because the thing that stands out to me, and nobody ever brought this up, Garcia had 2 or 3 years there where he didn't fight at all. And, you know, it was in what should have been the prime of his career.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, what would he have done in that span of time? I mean, maybe he gets a Jorge Linares fight, and maybe he's, you know, the real lightweight champion of the world. Who knows?
And maybe him and Lomachenko have already fought.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I honestly don't know what was so bad about his top rank contract. I mean, again, we don't ride with
Well,
any
it's Bob
promoter.
Arum, so there's a good chance he was getting screwed somehow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it wasn't Don King screwing, but you're still getting that, that top rank wiener,
Yeah,
but
the top rank wiener is obviously smaller, and we all know why. All right, let's move on and let's talk about WBA Super Featherweight Champion Javante Tank Davis, who will be fighting on July 27th on Showtime, possibly against former WBA 126-pound champion Yoriorkis Gamboa in Baltimore, Maryland. Um, this would have been an interesting fight a long time ago, but Gamboa, I think, has seen his better days. I will give Gamboa this. His last three fights, he's beaten Miguel Beltran, Jason Sosa, Alexis Reyes, or after the loss to journeyman Robinson Castellanos. But to me, this is still, Javante Davis should be screaming for the big fight. And you know what I mean there.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I've seen a lot of people make excuses for him, like, hey, he's not even in the same weight class as Lomachenko. Come on, man, give me a break. We all
Dude,
know
he's
that
bigger than Lomachenko, I think.
he is. Come on, anybody who follows the sport knows that Javante Davis has been struggling for years to make 130. I mean, wasn't he overweight in his last weigh-in anyways? He had to go lose, like 0.4 pounds or
He's
something.
been overweight a couple times in his probably twice in his last 5 weigh-ins, I think.
Yeah, again, this is a guy who's continually struggled. In fact, we had a writer years back. Remember that? We actually have an article on the website. What is it titled? Javante Davis, a weighty problem or a weighty issue, something like that. So, I mean, and we're talking about this. This article was written, 2 years ago about? I mean, so again, this is something that we've known for years now. It's not a secret. So when you're saying, when you're trying to box him in and say, oh, well, he's a 130-pounder, he's not 135. And Javante Davis, to me, doesn't even seem like, I don't ever hear him say, oh, well, I can't fight above 130. He knows that the time is ticking. It's only a matter of time until he gets up there, and he's going to have to compete against these guys. And really, that's what he should be calling for. I mean, he should be fighting, a guy like Vasyl Lomachenko, and at the very least, make the Miguel Burchelt fight. I've been talking about that for a while now. These guys are number 1 and number 2 in their division, right? Create a new championship line. Again, don't. Look for leftovers in Gamboa. I mean, Gamboa was what was he stopped by? He was stopped by Castellanos in the 7th round, I believe, and he barely squeaked by Jason Sosa. In fact, a lot of people thought that Jason Sosa beat him that night. Of course, Gamboa, to his credit, did not get a full training camp there. That did seem like one of those things that happened on short notice, but obviously he was in training. But, I mean, Gamboa, come on, man. I mean, Davis has been a trinket holder for since 2016, 2017, and he's fought who? Pedrosa? That's it? Come on, man. He's got to do better. He's got to try to fight the best. I honestly don't give a shit if he calls out Lomachenko right now. I could deal with Miguel Burchelt. I could deal with that initially, in the short term, but we're not even getting that.
All right. On this day, you want to talk a little Zarate Zamora?
Zarate Zamora. We're talking about 2 huge bangers, and it's a rare thing when you're talking about
little guys that can bang. I mean, Zarate was 38-0 with 37 knockouts. Zamora, I think, was 29-0 with 29 knockouts. And I remember, because I used to get, I think it was Boxing Illustrated all the time when I was little. And I remember this. You weren't born yet. You were just floating around in your daddy's balls somewhere. And they used to call these guys the Z-Boys. And Zamora, let's see. It was either, because I don't remember this a lot. I remember the 2 main stories, which you saw the drunk getting in the ring in the first round. But was it Zamora that knocked out Eusebio Pedrosa, or was it Zarate?
Correct. No,
it was Zamora. Yeah, and he did it in the 2nd round, didn't he?
He fucked him up.
Yeah, he messed him up bad. I don't want to say bad words like Jeremiah because I don't want the kids listening to think it's all right. And kids, it's not all right to talk with a potty mouth like that. But also, the thing that really stood out to me, and you brought this up, and you brought it back to me. I saw the fight when it originally happened. I saw it a few years ago. But this is a fight that started off with a drunk, what was it, about a minute into the round, running into the ring, and 5 cops just beating the living shit out of him.
Yeah. No, I thought it was pretty funny actually because he got in the ring and he was just standing there. He didn't really move. He just stood there, and he didn't really make many gestures. And then finally, he makes this when he saw that the cops were entering the ring. He made this kind of karate-esque gesture as if he was about to beat some ass or something. And the tables were turned pretty quickly. I mean, it was funny because the one cop wasn't playing at all. He just grabbed him by his neck, threw him down.
Anti-riot cops that they had there. This wasn't just normal cops. And didn't Lionel Rose and Chuchu Castillo fight in the same place? And there was a big brawl there, I think, in the late 60s, early 70s.
I think so. I'd have to look that up again. I'm not exactly sure, but I know Rose was competing around that time, and I know he did compete at what was that? The Forum? Where was his fight at?
It was Inglewood Forum.
Okay.
And they had anti-riot gear and all this crap because they expected something to happen. And it was actually, for the 4 rounds, it was a very entertaining fight. If I remember right, Zamora won the first round, but then Zamora appeared to get hurt in the second round, and from there on, it just seemed that Zarate was just stronger, fresher, and just better than Zamora.
Yeah, and I do think it was pretty close. I don't think Zarate was that much better than Zamora. I actually think highly of Zamora. I mean, he
So do I. I think Zarate was just a little bit stronger. I think they were even, and I think the difference was Zarate was just a little stronger, and I think he hit a little bit harder.
Yeah, well, and that's the sort of thing. I mean, when you got power like Zarate, all it takes is one punch to, just make your game plan go out the window. So, it's one of those things. Like, you look at how Pedrosa turned out after he got, beat down in the second round by Zamora. Sometimes it just throws your whole game plan off. And that just seemed like what it was to me because it was kind of a feel out round in the first. Then they beat the guy up. And I thought it was pretty funny, too, because they took him close to the ropes and they just, threw him out. They didn't really wrestle him or, lightly carry him. They just threw him out and then dragged him across the side of the ring.
Watch the whole fight, and if they show the after the fight, there was actually a fight after the fight, too, between Alfonso Zamora's dad and Arturo Hernandez. And I think the story went that Hernandez at one point trained both of them. And I think Hernandez sold Zamora's contract to his father, Alfonso Zamora Sr. And for some reason, Zamora's dad took that as a form of disrespect towards his son. And there ended up being a fight afterwards, which the riot police had to stop between, the one's father, the other one's trainer, Zamora's father, and Arturo Hernandez, who was the trainer for Zarate at the time. So there was 2 really good fights there. And when you look at it, I think Zarate moved up and lost at junior featherweight to Gomez. But I'm pretty sure he defended his title a few more times. And then I remember this well because in 1979, remember when me and John Einreinhafer always talk about the great cards they used to have on ABC?
Sure.
I forget who was the main event June 3rd of 1979. But I think the card opened with a Lupe Pintor taking on Carlos Zarate. Zarate was a huge favorite in that fight. Nobody had really heard of Pintor too much yet. And Pintor won a 15-round split decision in a hell of a fight because both of these guys, almost every fight they ever had was a war. And Lupe Pintor was one of my favorite fighters. If you haven't seen him and Wilfredo Gomez, I suggest you watch that. And that was on, I think, the undercard, the co-feature for the Hearns Benitez fight at the Superdome. But it's an absolute outstanding fight, too. And Lupe Pintor, I think, is a really underrated guy, as is Zarate. And then Zarate lost his title there. I don't think he ever got it back. And I think like a decade later, he fought Jeff Fennick for the junior featherweight championship in like 1987. Of course, he was stopped by Fennick because he was like 75 years old by that time.
Yeah, exactly. And then they threw him against Daniel Zaragoza to end his career, which was another WBC title. And it's funny because, I mean, I've written about this, and I was giving the WBC shit today on Twitter, about their bias. It's like, what did Zarate do to deserve either one of those shots? Not a damn thing, But
they gave Roberto Duran a shot against William Joppy too. I mean, hell, I don't have as much problem with it when it's a guy that has accomplished something before. You give him a payday to leave on. Hopefully, you don't get him hurt when you do it. I think the most important, or the biggest takeaway to me from this fight was how quickly Alfonso Zamora just kind of disappeared after it. I think he was knocked out his next fight by Jorge Lujan, who was another guy like Pintor, who was a hell of a fighter back in the 70s, early 80s. And then I think that was about it for him. I don't remember ever seeing him again after Lujan beat him.
Yeah, he did carry on, and he actually beat Alberto Sandoval, who was a pretty good fighter. But then, it was downhill from there. I mean, that was pretty much the peak after his peak.
Yeah, because I think after the Zarate loss, I think the rest of his career, he was like a 500 fighter, wasn't
he? Yeah, pretty much. He was just above it. It looks like he was 4-3.
I thought he was like 5-4 or 4-4, but.
Yeah, no, he was 4-3, so he was just about 500 there, and it's unfortunate. Again, I really like Zamora. I mean, the fact that he was able to start Pedrosa as quick as he was. I mean, and he was just to me what I like so much about him was he was fluid. I really like guys like, like Roman Gonzalez, who I posted about yesterday. Just guys who are fluid in everything that they do. They just have this natural knack for getting their punches off crisply and consistently. And Zamora, to me, was one of those guys. I mean, he looked like he was a born puncher, and against Zarate, who was the better fighter. But it just seemed like, even if you watch the stoppage, going into the fourth round, Zamora was no punk. I mean, he went out on a shield. I mean, they were firing back and forth, and Zarate just seemed to be a bit better on the inside. And funny, you wouldn't think that because Zamora was the shorter guy, but yeah, Zarate was just the better in-fighter and, clipped him, and that was that. I think there was two knockdowns before the stoppage, but it's a hell of a fight. That's one of those ones worth checking out too.
Yeah, and Sandoval. You talked about Alberto Sandoval. I think they called him Superfly because I remember he was on the front of Boxing Illustrated too. He was supposed to be an American that could win a title there. He beat Sandoval, which is a damn good win. I think Sandoval was ranked top 5 at least, if not number 1 or number 2 when they fought. And then, if I remember right, he got DQ'd against a guy overseas, and that was pretty much it for him. And here, I'm on Box right now. Yeah, he has his career by losing to a guy who's 13-13, losing to a guy that's 7-7, beating a guy who's 9-12, beating a guy who's 8-1 and retiring. And I think that it just goes to show you sometimes, losses affect everybody differently. And we've seen this before where, like we've talked about John Mugabe before, where he looked like really a beast. And then once he lost, that era of invincibility was gone. And I think with Zamora, you could bring up the same thing. This is a guy that had knocked everybody out. Then all of a sudden he gets knocked out, and he just doesn't handle it right.
Yeah, no, it seems to be a common theme with punchers, doesn't it? I mean, you think you can bully everybody, and then when you get to the pro game, I mean, it's not as easy as you think. I mean, you got to start boxing. You got to understand the nuance. I mean, everybody, and that's the thing about, Golovkin is people are like, oh, well, when he was in his prime, and people are like, oh, well, he's got this high knockout rate, and everybody's talking about his knockout streak, but the dude didn't get by just on his power alone. Nobody really does. I mean, look at a guy like Randall Bailey, who's probably the hardest 140-pound puncher I've ever seen, and he didn't beat very few people of note. He beat Carson Jones. after losing most of the fight, catches him with an uppercut. That was good, right? But, when he fought the best guys available like Miguel Cotto, he just couldn't get it done because he relied far too much on his power. He was predictable. You knew the right hand was coming. Sometimes he would jab you, and that was pretty much it. But, yeah, it happened a lot with punchers. And I want to ask you one thing before, we sign off here. But Zamora was ranked at bantamweight, and so was Wilfredo Gomez. So they were ranked at the same time.
They were supposed to fight. I think the story was they offered Zamora that fight in like the early 80s, but he'd already retired in 1980 and he turned it down.
Well, they were ranked at 118 at the same time. This was obviously before Zamora got knocked off by Zarate. I want to know how you see that fight playing out. I don't know a ton about Wilfredo Gomez. Obviously, he's well known in boxing circles. He had a huge knockout streak as well. And,
I'll tell you another one I'd like to see. I'd have liked to see Gomez and Pedrosa because I think that would have been an extremely interesting fight. But I think Gomez wins the fight. And the reason I think that is basically what happened after Zarate beat Zamora, which tells me that there was a disconnect or lack of confidence once he lost that fight. When you look at Gomez, he got destroyed by Salvador Sanchez, but he came back to reclaim a title. And even though I think he lost to a guy like Rocky Lockridge, he beats Juan Laporte in a close fight, he still was able to recover from that. So to me, I would go with the guy that I think is probably mentally stronger. And both guys were huge bangers. I think Gomez, I don't know, the competition for both of these guys, those divisions weren't deep at that time. There was 4 or 5 good guys. And then you get the guys like Pintor and Lujan that come around 1980, 81. But I think I would go with Gomez because it just sticks out to me big time that after Zamora lost, he kind of fell apart after that, except for the one night against Sandoval.
Okay, fair enough. Well, what about Pedrosa Gomez?
Pedrosa outboxed him, clinches him. The Pedrosa that I saw in the early 1980s, I think would have beat him. I think he was a little smarter. Now, if he would have fought in San Juan, Puerto Rico, it could have been different.
Yeah, yeah. You're
Tell
right
me where they're fighting. Yeah, if we just put them in Madison Square Garden, well, you still may go that way. If you put them in L.A., I would go with Pedrosa. But really, I think Pedrosa is a guy who got exponentially better from about 75 or 76 to when you see him in 1981. And I think he is a guy that is a lot more nuanced, and I just think a more complete fighter.
Okay. I think most hardcore boxing fans, like guys who actually grew up in there, I think most of the people would agree with you.
Yeah, because the thing that always sticks out to me, to a knockout puncher that gets knocked out and then he's never the same again, he always had that weakness in the mind, which we saw with Mike Tyson. Once he was knocked out, he was never the same again, because the biggest thing there is it's not even that you lose confidence in yourself. It's that the guys before that may have been afraid, after watching you get your ass handed to you by Carlos Zarate in the 4th round, all of a sudden you lose that aura of invincibility. That's gone. So if you lose a little bit of confidence in yourself and everybody that's getting ready to fight you all of a sudden is less afraid of you, you put that together and it usually ends in disaster for the big puncher that lost.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's like once you lose that, guys are willing to stick it out a little bit longer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're not afraid.
No, they're not. Yeah, they'll hang around a little bit longer if they have to, and sometimes that's all it takes.
Yeah, but all right, Jeremiah, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for tonight. We will be back tomorrow night and Friday night. Thursday night, of course, we will not be on air because we'll have a live NFL draft show, which you can catch live at 8 o'clock Eastern on thegruelingtruth.com or Spreaker. Or you can go to Zeno Live Radio, where there should be a live playing of it on there. Or you can go download our iTunes app from the iTunes store, where you can hear the show then also for free. You can hear us there. Tomorrow at noon, me and Steve Risley will be back with our special guest, NFL draft analyst Anthony Servino, to talk about the defensive players, the best ones the guys we think will be bust for Thursday's drafts. So we will be live tomorrow at noon with that. At approximately 2 o'clock tomorrow, me and Bobby Sheridan will be back with the Sheridan Report. Tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, former Cincinnati Bengal Joe Kelly will be with me to do a Cincinnati Bengals draft preview show. And then, of course, the main event at the end of the evening is me and Jeremiah. And hopefully we'll have something good to talk about in boxing again. And if we don't, we'll talk about some old shit because that's more fun anyways. Jeremiah, anything to say before we sign off?
Yeah, actually, I try to change it up a little bit for tonight. And I was just going to say, if any of you are better writers than Aragon Garcia, hit me up. Hit me up. Hit me up. Yeah, I mean, we're always, looking for, fresh talent and people who are motivated here. And, if you're a quality podcaster, we're willing to work with you there. We work with a ton of other guys. Just look at the boxing section. We've got 4 or 5 boxing podcasts. Just by itself, we've got the Ringside Boxing Show on Sunday. We've got our weekly show on Sunday. We've got the Daily Show Monday through Friday. We've got the Last Round with Danny Z and Michael Shepard. We've got
Rope and Dope Radio with Chris Carlson.
Yeah, exactly.
Ringside Boxing Show with the writers of Intimate Warfare, John Raspani and Dennis Taylor. We got Montero on Boxing with Michael Montero, writes for the Ring magazine. So this is not something that we take lightly. Our boxing content,
this isn't some small time.
Yeah, our boxing content is legit. We got dedicated servers all over the world. This is only going to continue to get bigger. So if you've ever had the dream of hosting a podcast or being a boxing writer, here's your chance.
Yeah, or if you're a video maker. We work with video makers too.
Yeah, or if you're a massage therapist. Jeremiah could usually use one of them.
Mm-hmm. You just got to be in the Denver area because I'm not driving anywhere.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. I want to remind everybody you can hear all of our shows on Zeno Radio, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.